They thought 5 Panthers would crush 1 Sherman. He proved them wrong with 5 shots. June 10th, 1944, near Norien-Bessin, Normandy. The early light spread slowly across the fields, revealing the uneven contours of Normandy farmland. Wet hedgerows lined the narrow dirt lanes. Small pockets of mist still hung above the grass. The ground bore the marks of the last 10 days of fighting. Tracks pressed into the soil, burnt vehicle fragments, and shattered branches scattered near the edges of the orchards. Positioned beside a low rise overlooking a shallow valley sat a Sherman V tank of the Canadian 1st Hussars, Regiment B Squadron. The crew had halted here before dawn after receiving orders to support infantry holding the line against possible German counterattacks. Intelligence reports had identified Panthers from the 12th SS Panzer Regiment operating in the area. Inside the tank, each member of the crew prepared in silence. Corporal Thomas Hale, 27, occupied the gunner's seat. He had worked as a machinist in Windsor before enlisting. Mechanical work had given him calm hands and a habit of focusing on small details. He had fought in Sicily, then Italy, and knew what German armor could do. His task was direct, acquire targets quickly and fire accurately on command. Every second counted in tank combat, and Hale had learned to control his breathing, movement, and timing. Above him stood Sergeant Daniel Byrne, 31, the tank commander. Byrne had been a railway signal operator before the war. The job demanded clear communication and fast decisions. That skill followed him into armored warfare. He understood terrain, lines of sight, and the importance of keeping the crew coordinated. His job was to spot threats, give firing orders, and position the tank so they always presented the strongest armor toward the enemy. In the driver's compartment, Private Eddie Moran, 24, sat ready with his hands lightly on the levers. Moran was responsible for keeping the tank moving, forward to gain advantage, reverse to avoid a kill shot, or pivoting to maintain the proper angle. He was quiet and serious, aware that a few feet of movement in the wrong direction could expose the Sherman's weak side armor. Beside him, Private Jack Haskins, the bow gunner and assistant driver, checked the feed of his .30 caliber machine gun. His role was to suppress infantry and spot movement through his forward periscope. He had only been in Normandy for 10 days, but he had already learned how quickly German armor could appear from behind hedgerows. In the turret basket, Private Roy Mercer, 22, ran a cloth along the brass shell casings. He was the loader, responsible for maintaining a steady supply of 75mm rounds in the breech. His job required strength, speed, and discipline. He made sure the tank always had the correct ammunition type ready. Hale could only fire as fast as Mercer could load. Byrne lowered himself halfway into the hatch, scanning the small valley in front of them. The fog made it hard to distinguish shapes. "We hold here until further orders," Byrne said. "Panzer activity reported from the northeast. They may probe the line again." The crew acknowledged without hesitation. They understood their purpose: to support the infantry holding Norien-Bessin and prevent German armor from breaking through toward the coast. Hale adjusted his telescopic sight, even though nothing was visible yet. "Visibility's low," he noted. "If they push through that low ground, we won't see them until they're close." Moran tightened his grip on the levers. "Tell me the second you need movement." Mercer positioned 3 armor-piercing rounds within arm's reach. "You'll have AP ready as soon as you call it." For a moment, the tank interior fell silent, except for the faint ticking of cooling metal and the occasional drip of moisture falling from tree branches onto the hull. Then a distant vibration pierced the quiet. Haskins raised his head. "Engines," he said. "Heavy ones." Byrne rotated toward the rising sound, binoculars raised. The ground trembled again, slow, deep, rhythmic. Hale pressed his eye against the scope. "Multiple engines," he confirmed. "Not Sherman's." The fog shifted just enough to reveal movement. Dark, angled steel shapes emerging from behind a line of hedges 900 meters away. Byrne spoke quietly but with complete certainty. "Panther, front." Before the crew could react, a bright flash lit the fog. A German Panther fired. The shell slammed into the ground several meters in front of the Sherman. Dirt and debris exploded upward, striking the hull. Inside, courageous, the blast shook every man, but Byrne immediately regained control. Driver, reverse 10 meters. Gunner, get eyes on target. Hale steadied himself, sighting the Panther through the clearing mist. The crew had not moved into position expecting a tank duel against 5 Panthers. But that was now their reality. The ambush had begun. The shock of the Panthers' opening shot still hung in the air as the Sherman lurched backward. Eddie Moran pulled the levers smoothly, reversing at a controlled pace so Hale's sight picture wouldn't be disrupted by sudden movement. Inside the tank, the echoes of the explosion faded into a low rumble from the German engines across the field. Byrne held onto the rim of the turret hatch to steady himself. "Gunner, report," he ordered. Hale leaned into the sight, adjusting focus through the shifting fog. "I have eyes on one Panther. 900 meters. Slight hull-down position. Gun is on us." "Loader, AP," Byrne commanded. Roy Mercer reached into the ready rack, grabbed a 75mm armor-piercing round, and slammed it into the breech. "Round up." A second plume of exhaust smoke rose from the Panther's barrel. The German tank was preparing its next shot. Byrne lowered himself deeper into the turret, aligning his viewpoint with Hale's. "They'll correct their aim. We don't take another hit like that." The Sherman's armor could not withstand repeated fire from a Panther's long-barreled 75mm gun. The first shot had been short only because the Germans were still ranging in. "Driver, pivot left 10 degrees, Byrne ordered. "Give the gunner a clean angle on the lower glacis." Moran eased the left lever forward. The Sherman adjusted position by a few degrees, just enough to expose the Panther's vulnerable lower front plate. Hale tracked the movement through his optics. Target in view. The Panther fired again. The round passed over the Sherman's turret, missing by less than a meter, and detonated against the orchard wall behind them. Chunks of stone and earth showered the tank, pattering against the armor like small impacts. "Hold position," Byrne said. "Gunner, stand by." Through the fog, the Panther shifted slightly to stabilize its gun for a third shot. In doing so, it briefly exposed a flat section of armor. "Send it," Byrne ordered. Hale squeezed the trigger. The Sherman recoiled sharply. A burst of flame and smoke erupted from its barrel. Seconds later, impact. Hale saw the round strike the lower glacis, punching through the thinner armor plate. A small jet of fire shot out from the German driver's hatch. The Panther's engine compartment ignited, sending black smoke through the vents. Inside the Sherman, Mercer let out a short breath. "That's a kill." But Byrne wasn't celebrating. He was already scanning the fog. "Gunner, stay on your scope." There were more than one reported. The smoke from the first Panther shifted with the wind, revealing new silhouettes behind it. Hale identified them first. "Commander, movement." Multiple Panthers advancing. For maybe 5, Byrne steadied himself against the turret ring. "All crew, stay sharp. They're coming in force." The second Panther moved into the open, followed by 2 more behind it. Their engines growled steadily as they spread out across the field, attempting to flank. The radio crackled with faint chatter from infantry units, but no other armor support was close enough to help. It would be the Sherman alone for the next few minutes. Byrne lowered back into the turret, his voice firm and controlled. "All right, same plan. We don't let them get our sides." Mercer reached for another AP round without being asked. Hale leaned into the sight again, focusing through the thinning fog. The German tanks advanced steadily, their guns already beginning to traverse. The crew of Courageous understood the reality of their situation. If a single Panther's shot landed cleanly, the fight would be over. But Hale didn't speak. He didn't move away from the optics. He was already lining up the next target. The second engagement was seconds away. The valley ahead had changed completely. What had been a quiet stretch of open fields was now filled with the sound of advancing German armor. Their engines produced a low, steady vibration that passed through the Sherman's hull. Byrne reacted first. "Driver, cut right and take us toward that orchard line. We need partial concealment." Moran shifted the levers, guiding the Sherman across uneven ground. Branches scratched against the hull as the tank slipped behind the first row of apple trees. Through the gunner's periscope, Hale tracked the nearest Panther. This one was moving more aggressively than the others, angling left to gain a superior firing position. Its turret was already pointed toward the Sherman, the long 75 millimeters barrel steady. "I have one flanking left," Hale reported. "Speed's moderate. He's trying to get our side." Byrne leaned over Hale's shoulder, studying the outline of the German tank. "We can't give him the angle. Driver, pivot left and hold." The Sherman turned just enough to keep its forward armor facing the threat. The orchard's thin branches offered minimal protection, but the Panther's view was partially obstructed. Mercer stood ready with another armor-piercing round. "Just say when." The Panther fired. A jet of smoke came from its gun, and a split second later, a shell tore through the branches above the Sherman, which splintered and rained onto the turret. Haskins ducked instinctively. "Close one," he muttered. Byrne didn't acknowledge it. "Gunner, can you get a clean shot?" "Not yet," Hale answered. "He's rotating. Give me a few seconds." The Panther continued circling, its turret keeping pace. It moved with quiet confidence, aware of its superior armor and firepower. Byrne watched its movement carefully. "Loader, a P. We'll need it fast." "Up," Mercer called. The Panther slowed for a moment, adjusting its hull to stabilize its gun. In doing so, it exposed the area where the turret ring met the upper hull, a vulnerable point. "I have a shot," Hale said. "Take it," Byrne ordered. Hale fired. The Sherman's cannon recoiled with a deep kick. The round crossed the distance in a split second and struck the Panther exactly where Hale had aimed. A shower of sparks burst from the turret ring. Then the turret froze mid-rotation. The hydraulic system had been destroyed. Smoke seeped out around the seams. The German crew began to bail. First the loader, then the radio operator. One stumbled and fell to the ground. Inside the Sherman, Mercer exhaled sharply. "That's two," but Hale stayed on the scope. Another Panther had moved into view, advancing from the left side at a steady pace. This one was closer than the others, around 600 meters, and it was already adjusting its barrel toward the Sherman. "Commander, new contact, left," Hale reported. Byrne pulled himself halfway out of the hatch. "I see it. Driver, reverse 20 meters. Keep the nose toward him." Moran backed the tank steadily. Dirt churned under the tracks. The Sherman moved behind a more open section of trees, trading some concealment for better maneuverability. The second Panther fired. The shell struck the ground so close that the shock wave tilted the Sherman's right track off the earth for an instant. Tools rattled on the hull. Dust shook loose from the turret's ceiling. Hale tightened his grip on the elevation wheel. "He's bracketing us." Mercer immediately grabbed another AP round. "I'm ready when you are, Tom." Hale steadied his breathing. "Give me a second to get the angle." The Panther was repositioning, shifting to line up a cleaner shot. Its gun barrel tracked the Sherman's movement precisely, its commander likely using well-drilled range estimation techniques. Byrne lowered himself back inside. "He's trying to force us out, but he's exposed more of his side." Hale adjusted the traverse and elevation carefully. "I have him." "Send it," Byrne said. Hale fired. The round hit the Panther's side armor, which was significantly thinner than the front. The impact punched through the plate, and a flash erupted inside the turret. Smoke vented from the commander's hatch as the German tank came to a halt. The turret leaned where the internal structure failed. No crew emerged. "That makes three," Byrne said quietly. But the engagement was far from over. Through the gunner's sight, Hale saw two more Panthers spreading out across the valley, one moving toward a ridgeline, the other taking a slower, cautious path along a hedge. Hale did not look away from the optics. "They're not charging anymore," he said. "They're adjusting." Byrne nodded. "They know we're not an easy target now." He looked out across the fields, assessing the terrain, the angles, and the distances. Then he spoke clearly, his voice steady. "All crew, stay focused. The next one will be harder." The third kill had only stiffened the enemy's resolve. The real fight was about to begin. The orchard no longer offered any real protection. The branches were shredded, leaves covered the Sherman's hull, and the small patch of concealment they had used was collapsing under sustained German fire. The Panthers were adjusting their movements with more caution now. Byrne made the next call without hesitation. Driver, forward 10 meters, then pivot left. We need a better angle on that ridgeline. Eddie Moran moved the tank ahead, the Sherman bouncing slightly as it rolled over broken roots and churned soil. He then pulled the left lever and pushed the right, turning the vehicle into a shallow depression that ran diagonally across the field. The terrain didn't provide true cover, but it disrupted the Panthers' ability to guess their exact position. Hale watched the closest Panther through the scope. "It's advancing," he said, "faster than the others. Distance closing, 600 meters. This third Panther was not hesitant. It was pushing aggressively, its turret locked on the Sherman. The long barrel remained stable as the tank moved forward, its commander confident in the Panther's firepower. Mercer stood ready with another armor-piercing round. "When you call it, it goes in," he said. Byrne leaned into the turret, watching dust rise behind the German tank's tracks. "They want a straight shot. They're rushing to force us into a mistake." The Panther fired. The round slammed into the ground several meters to the Sherman's left, throwing up a plume of soil that clattered against the hull. The force shook the crew inside, but the tank remained operational. Hale spoke calmly. "He's walking the rounds toward us. Don't wait for him to correct," Byrne ordered. "Get the side plate if he keeps pushing forward." Mercer slid the AP round into the breech. Up. Hale shifted his aim. The Panther's left side armor, significantly thinner than the frontal plate, came into view as the tank angled slightly during its advance. He made a small adjustment to elevation. "Target set," he said. The Panther fired again. This shot passed just above the Sherman's turret, clipping branches overhead and exploding deeper in the orchard. Byrne didn't flinch. "Fire." Hale squeezed the trigger. The Sherman's gun roared, and recoil vibrated through the turret floor. Through his scope, Hale watched the shell impact the Panther's side. The round penetrated cleanly and detonated inside the fighting compartment. A flash illuminated the inside of the turret, followed by dark smoke forcing its way out through the commander's cupola. The Panther lost forward momentum, shuddered, then stopped completely. After several seconds, flames erupted from the turret ring. No crew exited. "That's 3 Panthers down," Byrne said. His voice remained steady, but the significance was clear. Hale didn't shift from a gunner's seat. He had already scanned past the burning wreck to the next threat. "Commander, 2 more Panthers moving. One's taking the ridge, the other's sliding wide along the hedge." Byrne looked out over the terrain. The one on the ridge was positioning itself in a hull-down posture, exposing only the turret. The second Panther was maneuvering to isolate the Sherman from the rear. "They're tightening the circle," Byrne said. "Driver, bring us out of this depression. We need full turret rotation." Moran pushed the Sherman forward, climbing the slight incline. The tank emerged onto more open ground, exposing itself more clearly, but giving Hale an unrestricted arc for the next engagement. Haskins watched the right flank through his periscope. "That wide one's slow," he said. "He's cautious." "He'll be last," Byrne answered. "The one on the ridge is next." Inside the turret, Mercer wiped sweat from his forehead. Hale pressed his eye to the scope, adjusting for the slight tilt of the ground beneath them. The third Panther burned in the distance, its ammunition cooking off in small secondary explosions. Smoke drifted across the field in long, broken patches. But Hale didn't look at the wreck. His focus was on the next target. The battle was shifting again, and the Sherman crew knew the remaining Panthers would not make the same mistakes as the first 3. The hardest shots were still ahead. The destruction of the third Panther changed the tempo of the battlefield. The remaining German tanks no longer moved aggressively. Their commanders had seen the pattern. Every attempt to expose the Sherman ended in a precise, lethal shot. They slowed their advance, coordinating with more caution. Through the turret optics, Hale followed the movement of the fourth Panther. This one had repositioned onto a gentle slope near the ridgeline. Its frontal armor remained angled, and only the turret was visible. The tank was nearly hull down, giving it the advantage of reduced exposure. Hale adjusted magnification. Commander, Ridge Panther is setting up to fire. Only turret showing. Burn rose slightly in the hatch, scanning the elevation and terrain distance. They're using the ridge for defilade. Hard target, but he's committing to the angle. Haskins monitored the right side. The fifth one still moving wide. He's not showing anything yet. Leave him, Burns said. This Ridge Panther shoots next. Inside the turret, Roy Mercer checked the ready rack again. AP shells lined. Just call it. The Panther on the ridge rotated its turret with slow precision, the long barrel settling toward the Sherman's position. It was a stable firing stance, exactly the kind of shot a Panther commander would wait for. Byrne gave the next order. Driver, nudge forward 3 meters. Slight pivot right. Give the gunner elevation. Moran eased the Sherman ahead. The hull lifted slightly as it climbed a patch of earth, raising Hale's field of fire by just enough to match the enemy's turret height. As the Sherman adjusted, the Panther fired. The German shell hit lower than intended, slamming into the base of the rise and sending dirt up against the Sherman's hull. The impact shook the interior, causing small fragments of rust and dust to fall from the turret roof. Hale steadied himself and continued aiming. Loader, AP, Byrne ordered. Mercer slid another round into the breach with practice motion. Up. Hale held the reticle at the Panther's turret ring, a small target at this distance, but the only vulnerable spot from this angle. He slowed his breathing. Commander, I can take the turret ring. Byrne didn't hesitate. Fire. Hale pressed the trigger. The Sherman recoiled, the gun blast echoing across the valley. Through his scope, Hale watched the round strike precisely beneath the Panther's turret, where the armor was thick but not reinforced. A small burst of sparks appeared. Then the Panther's turret gave a sudden jolt. Smoke began to escape from the vents on the turret's rear. The turret stopped moving entirely as fire started inside. After several seconds, a glow appeared through the gunner's optic port, growing brighter. That's a hit, Mercer said quietly. The crew watched the flames intensify. The Panther's gun barrel sagged forward as internal systems failed. No crew exited. Hale lowered the magnification and checked for new movement. That's 4 Panthers down. But Byrne continued scanning. There's still one more, and it's the cautious one. He watched all of that. Haskins spotted movement on the right. He's shifting, trying to flank again. Byrne tapped Moran on the shoulder. Driver, reverse slowly. Keep our front toward him. Don't give him a straight side shot. The Sherman backed into a more open patch near the orchard, turret already rotating toward the movement. Hale adjusted his elevation wheel. He's using the hedge line for cover. I only see parts of him. He's smart. Smart or not, Burns said. He knows we've taken down 4 of his tanks. He'll try something different. Hale stayed focused. He's not committing. He's waiting for a mistake. Byrne ducked back into the turret. Then we won't give him one. Everyone stay ready. This last one will push hard when he moves. The battlefield settled into brief, tense silence. Smoke rose from the 3 destroyed Panthers in the field and a 4th burning on the ridge. Shifting wind carried the smell of hot metal and oil across the landscape. Inside, courageous. None of the crew spoke unless necessary. They each knew that the final Panther was the most dangerous now. Not because it had superior firepower, but because it was being commanded by someone patient, careful, and fully aware of the Sherman's capabilities. Hale kept his eye against the scope. The 5th Panther had vanished behind the hedgerow. He was preparing the next move, and it would be the hardest one yet. The 5th Panther had disappeared behind a long, thick hedgerow that cut across the field like a natural wall. Hale kept his eye on the scope, adjusting left and right, trying to catch even a fragment of movement through the leaves. Nothing appeared. Burns scanned the right flank from the hatch, slowly turning his binoculars along the hedge line. He's not rushing. He's repositioning for a clean shot. This one's disciplined. Haskins continued tracking through his forward periscope. He's hugging the hedge. If he cuts through one of the breaks, he'll be close. Inside the hull, Moran waited with both hands on the controls, the engine idling at a steady rumble. Just tell me when to move. Mercer stood ready with another AP round, gripping the shell firmly. This one's going to be close quarters. I'll keep loading until we're empty. Byrne dropped back down into the turret, keeping his voice steady. All right, driver, push forward toward the open lane. Don't let him slip behind the orchard. We stay nose on, no matter what. Moran advanced the Sherman. The tank rolled through the churned earth, pushing past branches broken from earlier shell impacts. They approached a narrow gap between the hedgerows, one of the few openings a tank could pass through. Hale swept his sight across the lane, but saw nothing. Then movement. A dark shape shifted behind the hedge to their right. Contact right. Very close, Hale said, tightening his grip on the traverse control. Byrne immediately responded. Driver, hard right pivot. Bring us online. Moran pulled the right lever back and pushed the left forward. The Sherman rotated, tracks grinding loudly over the soil. As the tank turned, the 5th Panther emerged. It burst through a weak section of the hedge, branches snapping off its glassy plate. The sudden forward motion exposed the entire front of the German tank. The Panther's barrel swung toward the Sherman with speed. Distance, approximately 300 meters. Nearly point-blank in tank combat terms. Haskins shouted from below, "He's aiming right at our side." Hale forced the turret hand crank as fast as it could go, but the Panther's turret was powered and already locking onto the Sherman. For a brief moment, both tanks had partial aim. The German fired first. The Panther's shell tore through the hedgerow, exploding against a thick tree directly in its line of fire. The trunk shattered in half, absorbing the full force of the shot. Splintered wood blasted across the Sherman's hull, but the tank remained intact. Inside, the crew reacted instantly. Loader, AP. Byrne ordered sharply. Mercer slammed the round into the breech. Up. Hale had already turned the turret enough to aim at the Panther's gun mantlet, a vulnerable point where the armor was strong but could be compromised with a precise hit. Commander, mantlet in sight, Hale said. Take it. Byrne ordered without hesitation. Hale pressed the trigger. The Sherman's gun blast pushed smoke back over the turret. The round crossed the short distance almost instantly, striking the Panther's gun mantlet dead center. The impact tore through the gun assembly, jamming the breech and sending fragments inward. Flames shot out of the Panther's turret vents. The tank's barrel dropped slightly as its internal systems collapsed. Seconds later, fire spread through the fighting compartment. Smoke thickened around the commander's hatch. The Panther shuddered, then stopped completely. It was over. Inside, courageous, the crew remained silent for a moment. Only the engine and the distant rumble of artillery could be heard. Byrne finally spoke, his voice low, steady. 5 Panthers down. Hale stayed at the gunner's station, keeping his eye on the scope for several seconds longer before exhaling slowly. Area clear, he said. Mercer leaned back against the turret wall, catching his breath. That was the last one. Haskins wiped debris from his lap. Tree saved us, he said quietly. Moran eased the tank out of gear, letting the engine settle. Byrne climbed back into the hatch, surveying the field. Smoke rose from 5 different points, 3 in the valley, 1 on the ridge, and the last burning only a few hundred meters away. The battlefield had gone still. The Sherman had survived what should have been an impossible engagement. Hale kept watching the smoke, as if expecting another enemy tank to appear. But nothing moved. The fight had ended, and the results were almost unbelievable. For the first time in nearly 20 minutes, the battlefield fell completely silent. No engines, no movement, just the low crackling of burning wrecks scattered across the valley. The crew of the Sherman Courageous stayed at their posts for several more seconds, waiting for a counterattack that never came. Byrne finally broke the silence. All crew, hold positions. Gunner, keep your scope forward. Bow gunner, keep scanning the lane. Hale complied, though he saw no further movement. The smoke from the 5 Panthers drifted across the fields, creating irregular shadows over the landscape. Through the haze, silhouettes of German armor lay still, some tilted at angles, others burning steadily. Moran checked the instrument panel inside the driver's compartment. Engine temperature holding. We took no direct hits. Haskins tapped the side armor lightly near his post. Tree trunk absorbed the worst of it. We're still intact. Mercer leaned against the ammo rack, breathing slowly, trying to process what they had just survived. No more movement anywhere. It's done. Burns stayed half out of the hatch, binoculars scanning in long, sweeping arcs. He waited for any sign of a surviving crew member, an infantry support element, or a second wave of armor. Nothing appeared. He lowered the binoculars and spoke quietly into the turret. Driver, advance slowly. Let's link with the infantry line. Moran moved the Sherman forward, guiding it around the burning wrecks. As the tank advanced, the full view of the battlefield became clear. One Panther lay on its side near the orchard, turret blown off. Another burned in the open field, thick black smoke rising from its engine deck. A third marked the ridge, its barrel dipped forward as flames consumed the interior. The fourth and fifth burned closer, one with its turret frozen mid-rotation. The destruction showed the pattern of Hale's shots, precise, intentional, and delivered at the exact moments when the enemy tanks exposed their weakest points. When the Sherman crested a small rise, Canadian infantry finally came into view. Soldiers from the Queen's Own Rifles approached cautiously, unsure of what they were seeing. One lieutenant hurried forward, rifle slung over his shoulder. He stared at the 5 burning Panthers, then at the lone Sherman advancing through the smoke. He walked to the side of Courageous, looking up at Byrne. "Is this all you?" he asked, confusion and disbelief clear in his voice. Byrne nodded once, pointing down toward the interior of the turret. Corporal Hale handled the gunnery. The lieutenant looked toward Hale, who was still seated at the gunner's controls. Hale didn't turn. He kept adjusting the elevation wheel, clearing soot from the optic housing, making sure everything still worked. The lieutenant shook his head slowly. 5 Panthers. We thought the whole squadron was up here. Just us, Byrne answered. Other infantrymen gathered around, examining the battlefield. Some took photographs. Others walked to the nearest Panther to verify what they were seeing. The expressions on their faces showed the scale of what had happened. These were some of the most feared tanks in the German arsenal. Powerful, well-armored, and devastating in open fights. Seeing 5 of them destroyed by a single Sherman in such a short span was beyond normal combat expectations. Inside the turret, Mercer finally took a long breath and sat down on an ammo crate. "I still can't believe it," he said quietly. Haskins replied from below. "We didn't have room for a single mistake. Not one." Moran kept his eyes forward as he idled the tank. "We got lucky on that first shot from the last Panther. If that tree wasn't there..." Byrne turned toward the smoke-filled horizon. "Luck helps, but it doesn't hit 5 targets in a row." Hale continued cleaning the optics, calm and focused. "It was timing," he said, "and angles." He paused, then added, "They exposed themselves. We took the shots." There was nothing more dramatic in his tone, just a simple, direct explanation. The crew stepped outside the Sherman for the first time that day. Their uniforms were covered in dust and flakes of bark. The air was hot from the burning Panthers, carrying the smell of fuel and scorched metal. Infantrymen gathered around them, asking how they had managed it, but Byrne answered with short, factual explanations. "We kept the front armor toward them. We forced them to move. We shot when they gave us a weak point." Word spread quickly through the Canadian lines. A lone Sherman had stopped 5 Panthers. No other armored support had been involved. No artillery had assisted. Just one tank and its 5-man crew. Officers arrived to confirm a claim. Photographs were taken from multiple distances. The battlefield evidence left little room for doubt. The Sherman crew returned to their tank later that afternoon, preparing to move again. Their orders would continue. Other villages still needed support. Other German units were pushing toward the line. There was no time for celebration. As Byrne climbed into the commander's hatch, he looked once more across the field. Smoke still rose from the Panthers, drifting toward the hedges and disappearing into the afternoon wind. He lowered himself into the turret and spoke calmly. "All right, let's get ready for the next position." Hale closed the breech and secured the sights. Moran ran a check on the levers. Mercer organized the remaining rounds. Haskins loaded fresh belts into the machine gun. The tank moved forward, disappearing slowly into the next line of hedges. 5 Panthers remained behind them, silent burning and unmoving. A battlefield that should have been a one-sided defeat had become something entirely different.